Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right, so our discussion this week was proposed by Mr. Baney here, as he loves the non-movie canon the most out of the three of us. I would say, I don't know, he's never really said that.
He loves books.
But he loves them books.
It's not even the books, it's all canon.
James, you only love books.
Yeah, I only love the books. That's a fact.
James's brand is books.
He's never actually seen the Star Wars movies. He only reads the novelizations of them. So, we decided to each of us come up with our pitch for a canon story to be told outside of the movies that we think would be interesting or different or cool or something we'd like explored, however we want to put it. So we're just going to pitch those here and talk about them briefly, and then we want to hear from you guys what yours would be and what you think of ours, regardless of how silly they may be. Spoiler warning. So since he pitched the idea, James Baney, why don't you go first and enlighten us with your pitch for a story of non-movie Star Wars canon?
Yeah, so I guess when I was kind of pitching the idea in general, I was thinking about stories that were kind of untold. Now, I was open to the idea of if there's something that somebody was willing to say, like, hey, I think it would be really cool if the Star Wars galaxy did something like this. But I think where I was coming from was something along the lines of like Count Dooku and when he used to be a Jedi or something. That's a cool like thing that we know about canon. But we've never really seen it explored. Also kind of similar to the like, oh, you fought in the Clone Wars, and then they like at some point they were like, yeah, fans want to know about that. Or the Kessel Run, that's another good example. At some point they decided to kind of tell that story because it just had its own legend. People were interested in that. So that's how the idea got pitched. And for me, I've always wanted to know about the prophecy that was talked about in the original trilogy and then somewhat expanded on in the prequels. And I've talked a lot about, Anakin being the chosen one and stuff. And all of those things, I think in general, are left to the viewer's imagination, I think, kind of like Yoda's species or something. I don't know that they'll ever really get into what it means to bring balance to the Force and define it. Because when they do that, that's like, midi-chlorians, and we don't like having that because the mystical side of it. But to me, that's just something that I wonder about so often. What was this prophecy? And Yoda says, maybe it was misread. So I would like to hear the story of so many years ago, how this came to be, how they even came up with the concept of like, well, the Force isn't balanced now, but one day we know for a fact, or we believe that there will be someone who comes along and this is how we came up with that idea, or this is how we were taught that idea. And then how did the whole thing get mixed up? In the sense of maybe it was something completely different, and that would be fun to explore. And then at some point, one of the characters, the only living individual from that movie, survives, and he has the story, and he hands off the story, and he says something that gets interpreted differently. He's got this story about what the chosen one is going to be, and when he like says it in his language and then dies, like maybe the people are like, I don't know, he said that he would bring balance to the Force, and like that idea gets passed on incorrectly, which would like totally throw for a loop years and generations later. They believed that it meant that Anakin would do something great, and it turns out it meant really that he was supposed to do something bad. I don't know. I just think the whole concept of that is really cool, and I'd love to see it explored in one way or another. I actually think it probably would be more likely a series or something. That would be pretty cool. But
so not a book at all.
Not a book, but no. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I think that if they honestly did that story, it would probably be a series. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of a weird thing to say. But I would love to read it. Is my thing.
What would be more interesting to you on them exploring the actual the real prophecy itself and how it was originally told, or how they misinterpreted it over the time?
I think there has potential to be two separate stories, you know, over millennia, we've always believed this one thing, and then, and we could come up with that story. And then like so many years later, we could also tell another story where some Sith came in and like twisted the story, you know, and then it became something else. I could see that being two stories taking place over many, many years. But at the same time, I think it could all be one story. I think it could be one thing. The discovery of the prophecy, and within one generation, it was perversed to something different. Because when the prophecy was delivered to the people, or whatever it is, there was someone like a Loki character who just like was like, no, I hate that. That can't be the way, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it so that doesn't live on in how I see it. And he forever created this parable that wasn't even true, you know. I think that would be such a cool ending to that story. We think the hero's going to get away, and then the bad guy steps in and somehow delivers it as something different. And then we all know how that ends, because so many years later, Yoda and Mace Windu are like 100% that's the prophecy, you know. And when it finally does come true, it's not what we thought it was. I don't know. It's just so interesting to me. But
when you say that, that's interesting to me, that someone could have manipulated it and intercepted it, and then they didn't know, they weren't aware of the interception of it, and then the changing of it. That interests me, as opposed to it just being, oh, there's a prophecy, and well, maybe we
misread it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, maybe we just read it wrong.
Maybe it was intentionally rewritten.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like
old Coruscant language from the, you know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, there's also like, there's plenty of like real life religious stories too. You know what I mean? Where people say like, that, you know, this testament of the Bible was rewritten by these people, so that's not really, you know what I mean? It's like, so I think there's a lot of like real life things that people could connect with on that story, and understand from a certain perspective that maybe these legends of the Jedi and stuff are built on man-made mistakes and principles.
Do you think the prophecy was written or realized on Octo?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that would be a great way to like tie the whole thing in, is to return years later to okay, again, I'm kind of picturing it like a film because I get so excited about it, but yeah, but to return to that place and revisit that for more storytelling, I think would be great, because it would be something familiar but yet so out of the time frame that we're familiar with.
I'm picturing like one old Jedi like dictating to another who's like writing it down, and he's like, all right, Bill, so then this guy's going to get born by a virgin on... And then you just hear Porgs like... And then he's like, what do you say? A slave on Tatooine? No, I didn't say a slave on Tatooine. And then he writes down the wrong thing, and it's all because of Porgs changed the whole prophecy.
Yeah.
No?
Well, yeah. I mean, I yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
No, I like it though, man. I think it's cool.
What kind of stories do you guys want to hear? John, you want to follow me up?
Yeah, we better save Lacey for last, because I have a feeling she's going to need a lot of room to get through the one she wants to talk about.
Watch me give a one-sentence answer.
Not going to happen. Yeah, so mine is strange. It's weird, but I think it could work. And everyone knows how I just have an affinity for Salacious Crumb. And it's not one of those joke things where I'm going to be like, oh, Salacious Crumb's my thing because I want to be a thing guy. It's no, I think he's funny.
I want to be a thing guy.
What is a thing guy, first of all?
I think it's like...
Careful what you say here.
I think it's like not being sincere, but wanting to have notoriety for something that is different, and you know that only you would be known for that. I'll just leave it at that.
Hey, it's like a personal gimmick.
Yeah, it's like a gimmick. Yeah,
a shtick. Sort of.
Right. Like that friend you always see at the bar who would like wear like sunglasses inside. You'd be like, I'm sunglasses inside guy. You know? Everyone had that friend. Someone out there listening right now is like, I was sunglasses inside guy.
John just lost 20 followers.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so mine is Salacious Crumb. I always thought he was funny and interesting in how his story is, where he stumbled upon Jabba's ship and then he got caught, and he's like, well, I'll keep you around, but you have to make me laugh every day and you have to be my court jester. So that's a lot of pressure on the little guy, but apparently he's gotten it done because he's still with Jabba till the very end, right? So my pitch for this book is the point of view and perspective of Salacious Crumb on all of Jabba's dealings, and it's called the Crumb Chronicles. And since he is a sentient being, he's very intelligent with a sense of humor. He is able to record this stuff in some way or another. So anything from Vader's meetings with Darth Vader, when Vader said, you better shut that thing up, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. His dealings with Han Solo, the bounty hunters, any crime deal, Beckett, Dryden Voss, whoever he came across through his time together, you see the chronological chronicle from Crumb throughout all this time.
Alliteration, like, whoa.
And you get, instead of getting Jabba's skewed view on things, you get it from this third-person jester guy who's just there to survive. So while I think it'd be fun, it would be quirky and weird, kind of like the from a certain point of view vibe, still be canon, but you get really like a fly on the wall, or in this case, a monkey lizard on the wall, point of view of all of Jabba's dealings throughout all the years.
I think that could be cool.
They did that sort of in the, Legends of Luke Skywalker book. There was like a very, very, very tiny creature at Jabba's palace that kind of talked to Luke. I don't know what was going on there. I guess it was to Luke. But yeah, just, I get the perspective. I think it's a little weird. I'd hate to open up the book and it's like, it just reads like chapter 1, squawk, 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 squawk.
Yeah, it wouldn't be squawk, it would be, oh.
Yeah. No, but he actually writes eloquently. He writes where you can read it.
Imagine if it's like, 'twas the 1st of November.
Yeah, exactly. Lord Jabba approached the bounty hunter.
The journey.
It was the longest of days. It was the hottest of days.
And it turned out it was a thermal detonator after all.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I like Star Wars a little quirky sometimes, and I think it would be a fun read and also informative. So maybe do it as like a YA, so young readers can learn more about Jabba's and his dealings in kind of a fun way from a perspective of someone who isn't Jabba the Hutt or the person he's dealing with.
I think in general, though, what the core of your story here is you would like to hear more about stuff that Jabba got involved in. Underworld, gangster, dark stuff coming out of like, what more has this character seen that we don't really know about?
And the whole time you're doing it with if you're picturing it in your mind, you're doing it from the Fraggle Rock puppet perspective of Salacious Crumb. He's just kind of crawling around Jabba's palace, and he's like going through the hallways, and then he's like listening in and looking through a grate, and you hear Jabba say like, "Where are you? I need you need to make me laugh." And then he scurries back, and
yeah, I could see that being cool. I like that. I find the quirky stuff fun too.
I know. So that's my deal. And now it is time for Lacey's. So strap in, folks.
Oh, geez. Okay, guys. So to no surprise to anyone, I would really like a Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, Fall to Darkness book. I think, to be honest, coming out of Force Awakens, I wasn't the biggest Kylo fan. I was kind of like all about Rey. Kylo was great, but he wasn't my favorite character. But after The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson turned me into a Kylo Ren fan. Like, he made the movie. Adam Driver was amazing. Everything about him was so interesting. So I would love, now that we know some of the details between him and Luke, I just really want to know what happened. And I think that's still a big gap in the story right now that they're probably going to fill in with 9. But I would love to know more about, like, what happened there. He came from Han and Leia. Like, how did it get to this point? And I think we talk about this a lot, guys, is like, we kind of like think certain things based on like little tidbits here and there of, oh, well, he was kind of ignored and this and that. Like, I want like straight facts. Like, this is one of those examples, like, I don't want to be left in the dark and like think on my own. I want to be told, like, how did this happen? How does a kid come from Han and Leia to become this thing. And just like his thought process would be really interesting to hear.
So you don't want the point of view, you just want to know, like, boom, this is how it went down?
Yeah, I want to know it from his perspective. I don't want to know it from someone else's point of view. I want to know, like, how did Snoke get involved? Like, did he start meeting Snoke early on in his life? Did he meet him later in life? Did he hear him in his brain? Like, you know, like that kind of stuff I really want to know. And I want to know more about the relationship between him and Han and him and Leia and him and Luke and the other people at the Jedi Temple or the Jedi Academy. A lot of people kind of like jokingly want him and Poe to know each other early on in life. Like, that would be such an interesting spin on things if he knew Poe early on and then he ends up doing all the stuff he did in Force Awakens and whatnot. I think it would be really interesting, and away from the Reylo side of things where people tend to quickly go to, like, I just want to know about more of his character, like who he is, what makes him make the choices later on, because I think, again, I go back to this, but like there's a huge gap, like that big drop that Han Solo makes in The Force Awakens after he's stabbed. There's this big hole, and he's such an interesting character, and he's so complex, and like I would just totally love to know more about him and what's going on in that fluffy hair-covered head of his.
Two short things I want to say is I think you're going to really convince people as soon as you bring in the Snoke element, because I think that was another thing people really wanted from Last Jedi that they didn't really get, is like some more
Snoke?
backstory on Snoke and that whole relationship there. So if you just, I don't know if it's just pitched as like a Ben Solo movie or book, then you kind of are, it's one thing, and then you say, and then he meets Snoke and what's his relationship to the group and stuff like that. And I think you could really bring people in there. The other thing was that I really got stuck on when you said how him and Poe might have known each other early. I'd never thought about that. That's never occurred to me.
Yeah, me neither.
That they might have known each other, and to say that maybe they were, not that like Poe was in the Resistance or anything like that, but like at a young age they might be like rival pilots. You know what I mean?
Cross
and
paths,
then for him to say, I never knew I had the best pilot in the Resistance on board. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Who talks first? Yeah.
Yeah, like that stuff is just an interesting dynamic coming from a different perspective of like, he's saying that because, I don't know, he wants to dig at him deeper, and that's something that he knows
drives
about
more
him,
of a
that
snark,
he prides himself on. Yeah. I don't know, like, I mean, that stuff's all there if it's even surfacey, but it's better when you have like a backstory and know there's more to it, because then you go back and rewatch Force Awakens, you're like, this is great.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that really drove my want for this book, outside of loving Kylo Ren, is from Last Shot, we get it from Han's perspective, and we get a little of Lando. I would love to hear it from Ben's perspective of maybe Han wasn't as bad as a father as he thinks, because, you know, he says he didn't hate him, but like, what happened there? Because you see it from Han's side. I want to see it from the other side as well.
Yeah, that's weird that you say that, because I just thought of Lacey. Remember when he tells Rey, Han Solo's the father you always wanted. He'll disappoint you, I promise.
Yeah.
So like, he thought he didn't think he was a good father, but he didn't hate him. It's just like a weird.
Right, because people tend to love their parents no matter what. Sometimes.
Yeah, the unconditional element, yeah.
Yeah. And then like the dice thing, they talk about on StarWars.com how the dice were a plaything for Ben Solo when he was younger. Like, that would be a really cool tie-in too. I just think there's this huge question mark, as usual, over Kylo Ren's head. And I think a lot of people feel that, especially after Last Jedi. You're like, okay, I love this character now. Like, where is this going to go?
How young are you picturing? Like, you're kind of writing the story because we don't really know, but like, when do you think Luke like took Kylo under his wing?
I think I would want it from probably like young, not teen yet. So like maybe when he's old enough to recognize what's going on, but then spend the majority of the book when he's with Luke. Like, I'd love to see a little like 8 to 12, 8 to 10, and then go into like the Luke stuff. I think that would be interesting. And then I'd love to hear more about the Knights of Ren. I feel like, again, that's something I missed in The Last Jedi. Like, they were such cool characters, and you see them in the Force vision Rey has, and there were all these questions in the air of, like, who are the Knights of Ren, Master of the Knights of Ren, blah, blah, blah. Like, how did they get to this point? Who are they? You know, who's underneath those masks? I think this would be a great opportunity to also go into those characters and fill in those question marks as well.
So I think because you kind of said all of it, as opposed to really landing on a particular age, I guess then the best way to handle that would probably be like the first third of the book is like when he's like young Ben Solo and there's not even anything dark in him at all. Then the middle of the book is like halfway when he's like starting to like really question stuff and you can see conflicted arguments. And then like the last part of it is like post turning into Kylo Ren and his perspective on what has happened in the past and how he regrets maybe some of those decisions or something. But yet he needs to move forward in the teachings of Snoke or something. Yeah,
you could also do it like Last Shot, though, where you have a certain period of time, whether it's
back and forth,
leading up to The Force Awakens, where he's having these flashbacks and a little bit of, you know, or it could be right after The Last Jedi and it's a lead-up book to the new movie. Like there's
or a Slumdog Millionaire situation. Where it's like, this is why I'm like this now.
Certain moments are coming back to him for certain things, or I don't know. I think it would be
Lacey, let me ask you this.
For all future Star Wars authors, I hate that. That drives me nuts. I hate reading books that do that.
Yeah.
That like
I don't mind that as long as you know
back and forth between stories, because I get lost and confused. Who am I listening to now? You know?
Right, right.
Lacey, so if you were to incorporate Snoke's luring of Ben to the dark side, how would you envision it happening? Like, would it be like how Palpatine literally would meet with Anakin and just kind of get inside his head and work on his insecurities? Or would it be more of a mental force thing? Like, how would you tackle it if you got to decide that?
See, I don't know. My problem is I've read so much fan fiction at this point that I have a mixture of fan fiction and what's true and what's not. I think what I would like to see would be him meeting Snoke at an early age like they did in the original cut of The Force Vision with Rey, where she sees him in the hallway. That's what the editor said anyways, that she originally had a little boy in the hallway with Snoke. And then just how that works, like I want to know if he's in his head or is it like he keeps showing up at these meetings, because obviously Leia and Han know about him, so he had to show up at some point. But I have a feeling it's because he's in his head. I mean, I'd like to see how that happened. I just feel like he was being groomed and abused early on without him really realizing it.
I latched onto the idea a while ago that Snoke and Luke they teamed up together to go find the artifacts and and that they were like friends and that Ben was kind of along and he was learning from both of them equally. But
I'm trying to think of a good example of a story where the main characters turned against the rest of the characters. I'm going to go back to this, and you guys are going to hate that I'm going to go back to this, but probably like a Hunger Games scenario where PETA gets turned against Katniss. Kind of.
Yeah, I guess
but
so.
Not tortured, obviously, but kind of tortured because he gets lightning and all these other things. You could only imagine the terrible things he's done.
Mm-hmm.
I just always thought it was kind of cool that if Luke was really truthfully searching for balance, maybe he was aware that Snoke leaned towards the dark side, but that he thought that maybe Ben's training could be partially light, partially dark.
It would be more interesting to me if Snoke was the one that was like, did you know Vader's your grandfather? Like, just dropping that. And Ben didn't know, and then he feels,
Well,
yeah.
I'll throw this out there. I think we know how he found out.
Right.
But
someone let it go on about Leia,
the holonet,
right?
Or whatever, yeah. The information became public all at the same time, and Leia says that she couldn't imagine facing Ben because she didn't get to tell him that himself, and now he probably knows. Not to say that, he's always checking his Twitter account, on while he's out with Luke, because who knows where they are? They could be in the middle of nowhere and they have no real connections, just stuff like that. But I don't know. I think that kind of was implied that's he found out at a certain specific time.
But it could be a scenario where someone dropped a hint, like even a note or something, and it's like Anakin with Obi-Wan or something, where he's like, "No, you're lying. You're a liar," you know? Yeah. And he's like, "No, there's no way that's true." And then it finds out that it's true, and that's what drives him to be like, "Well, then everybody's lying to me. He's right."
Yeah. Do you think that's too close to "I'm your father"? And he's like, "No, that's impossible." And then like has to
there
like,
had
figure
to
that
be
information
something
out.
Right, but there had to be something outside of Luke almost killing him, obviously. That was like the last straw. There had to be instances that drove him to Snoke. He didn't just randomly be like, I'm going to go with this guy. It had to be things over a period of time, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, Luke said he sensed an evil that he's never sensed before, and that's why he was going to kill him. So, yeah, what made him that way? I don't know if it's like teen angst and like the classic.
But it could be the
Vader
thing that drove it.
But I would like to. I mean, the most interesting thing here is like what you were saying about how Snoke maybe would turn him in many ways. Like, and I keep thinking back to, I don't know why. I keep thinking back to Anakin in the Jedi Temple when Mace Windu told him to wait, and Palpatine gets in his head and he's like, I'm the only one who can save her.
Right.
So to get Anakin to show up, and which really triggered everything. So I could picture Snoke being in Ben's head saying like, they don't love you.
Yeah, they don't care about you. Yeah.
And yeah. And him just being like, damn it. Like, I don't want to believe you, but you're saying all these things that seem to be true.
Yeah. And then Luke's going to turn on you. And then Luke does turn on him and he's like,
and then he sees the lightsaber. Yeah. Yeah.
I really want Knights of Ren though. I really do.
What if Snoke did something to Luke to cause him to do that?
I was just about to say that. I would hate that more than anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that. I like the idea that Luke made that decision consciously, knowing that he was going to a place.
You want to piss more Star Wars fans off? Have
Snoke
get inside and manipulate Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
but I do agree.
To a point where like
Ren
Luke
would be
died thinking he made that decision himself.
Yeah.
No, the worst thing is that Han died not knowing
that his son was about to put a saber through his chest.
No, that Luke is the one that drove his son there.
Yeah. But I also felt we're getting off topic here, I guess, but I always felt bad that Han really thought that, according to the screenplay description, that Han really thought Kylo Ren was going to give him his lightsaber there.
Woof.
Because Han wasn't, Han was smart, but he was also a little vulnerable.
He's the good
guy. So he's probably like,
as we've learned from Solo.
All right, my son is coming back, and I did it, and I can't wait to tell Leia and bring him home, and then, I'm dead.
Woof.
Poor Han. I like it.
On the non-canon side, I did have another book idea that I would really love. Personally, I love behind-the-scenes filmmaking stuff. I went to school for film stuff. I would love a book of a collection of stories of people that worked on Star Wars films. And it could be anybody, whether it be like someone that drew storyboards or someone that made costumes or someone that was a director. Kind of like a certain point of view collection of stories, behind the scenes moments that we've never heard from Star Wars, like their favorite moments that nobody knows about. I would love that.
Like the model puppet guy, Phil Tippett, just like little like things they would do, like old school techniques.
Dinosaur supervisor Phil Tippett. He had one job. Supervise the dinosaurs.
I love that stuff. Yeah. I think that's a good idea because I always loved the old school, like, backyard way of filmmaking that they employed in the original Star Wars trilogy, where they would, like, go outside a door of their hotel and film the Wampa scene, like, in Norway. They'd be like, it's so cold, we went outside the hotel door and filmed, like, Chewbacca lifting his head up above the snow. And somehow, to us, we saw Hoth, and it was perfect.
Yeah, stuff like that always is really interesting to me. Or even in the newer movies when you hear things like, this broke at this time, so we had to do this. Or actually there's, a guy pulling this person this way. Or like stuff like that is always just so interesting to me. And I think that those stories are so ready to be told, which it would just be very cool to me. And I'd love that.
I think they're also important now because you know how like when you were in high school and you had to do like math tests or whatever, and we had all those fancy calculators, so we were able to just forget how to do real math like the old school way.
You mean people forget that there's tons of people that work on these movies?
Well, more so like the technology's there to like just say we're gonna put that in there and we're gonna do that, and instead of like having to figure it out physically and do it and be more creative and tangible and tactile and that sort of thing. Like someone pointed out the other day in Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the bad guy actors was unavailable, and he was off set, and they had to get the shot in the truck, so they literally just put a stump in the front seat and put his hat and his coat on there and filmed the scene, and nobody ever realized it. They just drove the truck by.
Yeah, that's
and
the
it's
stuff
just
I
like,
love.
That's Steven Spielberg, and it's just friggin' brilliant. Like, so I love that kind of stuff, and I think they have brought it back to an extent, beyond the reliance on CGI. But I like the blend of both. But they like the old school John Henry swinging the hammer thing. I don't know. I have a soft spot in my heart for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, going back to what I just said, sometimes I feel like even the smallest jobs on these films kind of get lost in the big show business of it all. And it would just be really cool to hear from some of those kind of like, second grip. Like,
yeah.
The
people on the thousands and thousands of names on the credits list.
Right. Or like a sound mixer, like this didn't work, so we had to do this, or that kind of thing.
You'll get it in 2027 when Star Wars is 50.
Yeah. But unlike Marvel, you don't get a scene at the end of Star Wars credits, so you don't have to sit through them. So you never see all those names.
Right.
All right on. Well, that is our discussion. We gave you our pitches for stories we would like to see made in books outside of the movies. Let us know what you think of those, and also let us know what yours would be, whether it would be something about the dark side, the light side, whatever.
Are we going to do a poll of whose book would sell more copies?
Yeah, we could do a poll of that. It'd probably be yours, because you would do hashtag Raylo, hashtag Save Ben Solo, and then poll would be over. But anyway, we had fun with it. Let us know what you guys think, and we will talk more about it later on. So, James, thanks for the idea.
Hey, you're welcome. Hey everyone, thanks for watching that video, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and head over to the full episode by clicking this box here. If you want, you can subscribe, and that way you get all the weekly news, you get our discussions, you get information on our giveaways whenever we do them. It's a good time, we promise. Thanks for watching the Resistance broadcast.